Is Nvidia willing to destroy the RTX 4070, maybe even the RTX 4070 Ti? Maybe. We have some rumors that, these are just rumors, but there's the potential that their next GPU may have a lot more VRAM than what we were initially expecting. Now, don't get me wrong, the 4060 Ti most likely, definitely at least, is coming in a 8 GB variant. Most likely from what we've seen, and I use these words most likely, probably, because right now the GPU is not announced. So I want to make sure it's clear and transparent. This is my analysis of the situation. The 4060 Ti, 8 GB of VRAM, probably, I would say, announced sometime in end of May and coming out sometime next month. But there's a surprise here that we didn't know about. There may be a different variant of this 4060 Ti that's going to be launching later. Why is this important? The 4070 is not selling at all. Some models are even dipping under MSRP, such as this model here. This is an MSI 4070 that's at around $575. Also, to be clear, there's some indication this particular model may have some hardware issues that's helping push its price down. So it's not all, 4070s, for example. Just want to give you guys all sides of the coin here. Today's video is brought to you by Jawa.gg. Jawa is a terrific place where gamers can have a community where they can discuss, buy, sell, and even plan the builds that they're doing. Something that's going to be very important in the current PC building climate that we are in now. They have verified sellers if you'd like to put something together and have a build done for you, or you can purchase your own parts. You don't have to worry about scalpers here. They have a nicely curated market, and a lot of the sellers have really good pictures as well as selling information to make sure that you're getting exactly the product that you want. They also offer a GPU buying program if you don't want to go through the hassle of selling to an individual, where you can get a quote for your GPU. So remember to check out Jawa. Use the link in the description below, welcome 10, and you'll get a nice $10 discount off of your first order. And now let's go back to the video. Definitely, we've seen some, benefits, you can say, to buying a 4070. Like Micro Center had the $100 Steam gift card. It's not exactly reducing the price, but it's definitely something in addition to that high price of $599. The problem is that the VRAM, even though 12 GB of VRAM on the 4070 is better than 8 that we saw on the 3070, all of the other memory specifications aren't what gamers would want on a 70 class GPU. Only a 192-bit memory bus. You have some limited bandwidth as well. And then that's why the 4060 Ti seems to be dead in the water at 8 GB. Nobody wants an 8 GB GPU in 2023. It's going to have a 128-bit memory bus. It's going to have, very limited bandwidth compared to even the, 3060 Ti. Of course, there are other benefits that do come with the newer generation, like L2 cache. So there are other things, built into the GPU that will be a positive, but overall, I think with only 8 GB of VRAM, it's a net negative. Now, the GPU that supposedly Nvidia will also launch is going to be the 4060 Ti 16 GB version. Now, as far as we know, this isn't going to be any faster memory bandwidth. It's just more VRAM. And it's going to be basically the same type as we see on the lower end 4060 Ti. And then we're assuming we'll see the same type of 8 GB configuration on the 4060. Now, Nvidia has certainly done this in the past, like the 3060 had 12 GB of VRAM compared to the 3060 Ti, which was the higher end GPU with only 8. So they can definitely play these games and have more VRAM. They could say the VRAM maybe bandwidth is faster on like a 4070, so it's not exactly cannibalizing those sales. But if we have a 16 GB 4060 Ti, that's going to be a very interesting proposition. If people ask me which one should you get, a 16 GB 4060 Ti or a 4070, it's going to be a hard choice because 8 GB is definitely not what we want in 2023. But then the 4070 will have overall better performance than a 4060 Ti, probably, more CUDA cores. It's going to be a better performing GPU in terms of frames per second. But when it comes to VRAM allocation, I don't know. 16 GB is definitely very, very nice nowadays. Look at all the games like Last of Us, Jedi Survivor, Hogwarts. All of these games eat up a considerable amount of VRAM. A Resident Evil 4 remake, they definitely eat up a lot of VRAM, even at 1440p. You don't even have to go to 4K to see a lot of VRAM being allocated and also being used. I was curious if a 3060 Ti 8GB would do okay, because then we would have some inkling as to what would happen on the 4060 Ti if it was only 8GB. Surprisingly, if you keep some of the settings in check, it's not as bad as people make it out to be, even though we should not be getting 8GB GPUs in 2023. They're going to become outdated very, very fast. Let's say you would assume with a 4060 Ti, you could game fairly well at 1440p. After all, Nvidia sold the 4070 as a 100 FPS 1440p GPU. So a 4060 Ti is generally going to be a little bit under that. So you can imagine it should be somewhere between 80 to 100 FPS, like on average, if Nvidia is using that figure. But with 8GB of VRAM, we do run into other issues. If games are trying to allocate that for textures, for ray tracing, that's going to be something that's going to be a major bottleneck for gamers. Now, Nvidia does have DLSS 3 on the RTX 40 series GPUs. This is a little bit controversial. Some people feel, and I agree with them, that the GPU should have the hardware and the performance without any type of upscaling technology, AI. As good as DLSS 3 may be, that's not implemented in every single game, and when it is, you do have some higher latency at times. NVIDIA Reflex does help it, but it's not definitely a win-win all the time, and at the end of the day, not everybody wants to use that technology. Not every game supports it, so it isn't going to be a selling factor for the GPU as a primary sort of, thing that you get the GPU for. It should be a nice add-on. Let's say if you just want a powerful GPU and occasionally you want to play a game that's a AAA title with DLSS 3, then of course you're going to have that on the GPU. Look at some of the games that came out. A lot of them don't even have DLSS 3. Jedi Survivor could probably benefit from it, but it certainly doesn't have it. Last of Us doesn't have it. Some games that are maybe AMD sponsored are going to have FSR. So not every game you're getting DLSS 3 that comes out that people do want to play. So that's why gamers are right in saying they want the hardware to be good first, regardless of any type of bonus, upscaling or AI. So that's where the 16 gigabytes of a 4060 Ti come in. Would Nvidia be willing to give you 16 gigabytes of VRAM and a pretty good GPU? Maybe, after they saw the sales numbers for the 4070 especially, and it's definitely not moving. I mean, I look at inventory from the different stores that I've been checking, and it doesn't seem to be moving from week to week and day to day like every other GPU so far, previously has been moving. Even the 4070 Ti seems to have sold a little bit better than the 4070, especially if you consider the difference in numbers. 4090 definitely was much, much bigger of a seller. So that's what we're going to have to see. Is 16 gigabytes of VRAM even coming? Is this just something that NVIDIA throws out there? Remember, they said the 4070 could also come in different VRAM configurations. We haven't seen that so far. It doesn't mean we won't see it, but it's not something we're going to see initially. I think the initial 4060 Ti launch will be 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and depending on the price, it's not going to be very popular at all. If it's $499, I think based on the specifications that we know now and how the 4070 is and how the 4070 is selling, $499 is absolutely dead in the water. Do not recommend type of GPU. At $399, I think then you can make an argument that some gamers will benefit from DLSS 3. It is a more efficient GPU. I just like to point out the positives so we have like an objective view of what's coming. And $399 is the price of the 3060 Ti, and this one should be better at least. And I mean, 3060 Ti's are still expensive. Even if you check on the used market, they're still going for like over $300 for the most part. So it's not like they've completely dropped in price to like $100 and the 4060 Ti is going to be such a big difference. So I would say if NVIDIA prices an 8 gigabyte 4060 Ti at $399 and then a 16 gigabyte 4060 Ti, maybe $449, I don't think it merits a $100 increase to $499. At $450 to get a 16 gigabyte 4060 Ti, I don't know. That sounds then like it could be a reasonable GPU as long as everything else is good on it, like that L2 cache, all of the other specifications. It is going to be efficient, like we said. So I could see 450 for a 16 gigabyte GPU. Gamers would stomach that a whole lot better than just 8 gigabytes. If Nvidia pulls like some funny games and decides to price $499 for an 8 gigabyte 4060 Ti, that's likely not going to be a very good business move because people are going to be completely against it. The initial reviews are just going to destroy it at that price point. And then what would happen with a 16 gigabyte 4060 Ti? They have to go to like 550. The 4070 is not doing good at $599, so they know they really can't get near that price. They have to give us a lower price and something better in the hardware. They have to make that 4060 Ti at least 16 gigabytes of VRAM. $499 is certainly way too expensive, even for a 16 gigabyte version. $450 is where I could see gamers accepting it as a decent value. It's probably going to perform pretty well at that price. And then $399 they can leave for the 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte. And then that still leaves them the $300 range for the 4060, which may have, a different VRAM configuration. It's going to be obviously slower. So that's sort of the pricing that I see going forward, but there's no doubt that a 16 gigabyte 4060 Ti would definitely cannibalize a lot of sales of the 4070. At this point, without seeing a review of each GPU and the benchmarks, it's hard to say if you should buy a 4070 over a 16 gigabyte 4060 Ti. That's going to be something that either Nvidia would add just to make sure that they can have competition in the market. Remember, AMD most likely will have a lot more 16 gigabyte GPUs entering the market. So this could be some type of a plan also to maybe throw AMD off. Like if there's a 7700 XT, very likely that would be 12 gigabytes of VRAM, just like the 6700 XT. But anything that comes in like a 7800 XT type of flavor, that one is very likely to have 16 gigabytes of VRAM. And after all, that's going to compete heavily with like the 4070, maybe even getting close to the 4070 Ti, depending on how the performance is. So if Nvidia has a much cheaper GPU that's 16 gigabytes of VRAM, like the 4060 Ti, that could definitely be a bit of a strong marketing play for them in light of all the negative press that they get over really skimpy VRAM allocation that they put on these GPUs. Would be nice to see a 16 gigabyte model. I'm not sure if it's going to happen yet, however, so we're going to have to wait and see. So remember to subscribe, smash that like button. We're going to wait and see exactly what happens. Hopefully they price the 4060 Ti at a much better price and give us something extra in the hardware, or else it's going to be another failure of a GPU like we've been seeing one after the other. All right, guys, so let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you guys on the next video.